And then welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Adipo. Glad to have you join us. This episode would raise issues on policing and insecurity in Nigeria against the backdrop of the renewed debate on state police. We know the president recently met with state governors over the issue of insecurity in Nigeria and then brought up the prospect of state policing as one of the measures to curb the rising spate of insecurity. We will look at the pros and cons of having state police confined within the control of states and local governments, perhaps. In the course of this program as well, I would flip the conversation to yet another issue making the rounds, and that's the clamor by some former lawmakers and indeed sitting ones as well for a return to the parliamentary system of government. Well, they clearly do seem to have their reasons, and some of these reasons will be talking points for us here on this episode. Do sit tight and expect some insightful thoughts on both issues when we return from the break. Insight begins now. I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and
look into the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural values.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
And applications, there are terms and conditions that
of course it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nnamdi Adipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
We'll begin this time with the fallout of a recent meeting between President Bola Tinubu and the 36 state governors on how best to combat insecurity in Nigeria and the seeming agreement for the creation of state police. If that is to happen, how would the constitutional amendment process go? Would state police truly solve the country's insecurity challenge, which appears to be multifaceted? Would that also bring policing closer to the people, and perhaps the local government can as well have council police departments? Also importantly, how would the states basically fund the additional wage bill, considering how tight things are in most of these states? Well, let's bring in my guests at this point to get their views on some of the questions that I have, and of course some of the questions you, the viewer at home, may also have as well. Dr. Kingsley Uzoma is here with me in the studio. He's a public affairs analyst as well as a security and safety consultant. Thank you so much for coming in, Doc.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. And joining me via Zoom from Lokoja, Kogi State is a human rights activist and the executive director, Initiative for Grassroots Advancement, INGRAIN, Hamza Aliyu. Hamza, good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me again.
Great. Gentlemen, let's jump right into it. I think it's best I start with you, Hamza, there from Lokoja. Why does it seem like the states are in a hurry to embrace state police, knowing some of what we know right now? And is it necessarily the magic wand that we've been waiting for, perhaps when it comes to insecurity in states? Your state, Kogi, is one of the most affected.
Well, Nnamdi, that is the million-dollar question right now. Everybody is asking ourselves, because if you remember, these same state governors were the ones who rejected the idea of the concept of state police, and now all of a sudden we're seeing this rather probably a knee-jerk reaction to the issues of insecurity that has prevailed our country. And like you said, we are beginning to suspect that they are beginning to lose a grip of the security situation in the country, and so they are looking for a quick fix to it. And I don't think that is the right way to go. We need to look at some of these things critically again to begin to ask ourselves, this particular method or this particular process we want to go through. We're seeing what looks like a knee-jerk reaction from our state governors. Like I said earlier, we knew very well that earlier on in the past democratic circles, these same governors were the ones who said clearly that the state police was not a viable option, and they gave all manners of challenges that it's going to pose on both the state and the federal government, including the local government. And so what we're seeing now is more like an acceptance that they are beginning to lose grip of the insecurity situation. But be as it may, the issue of state police has always been fundamental in our constitutionalism that we practice. We practice a federal system of government, and so it's always against the tide of the water that we are having a centralized police system, whereas we say we're a federal system. And there's no federation in the world that practices a central police system and it works for them. Again, looking at our population, the issue of a centralized police system will be really, really ineffective, looking at the fact that we're over 200 million and we have this very poor resource police force. And so it's not, there is no gain saying that we ought to have gone that route of state police. But the question will have always been that how are we going to do it? What is going to be the modalities? What is going to be the checks and balances? We all know what the issues, the challenges will be if we go through the state police. But the question will be, most persons don't know what options do we have when we say, what do we do in terms of what these problems are going to bring for us, in terms of who controls the police, who funds it, who gives it orders, who will accept responsibility when issues are not going the way they are. So all those nitty-gritty things in terms of the administration and the operation of the state police will have to be agreed on the table. And so
True.
I'm looking forward to, yes, these same governors that accept it, let's see them when it comes to these discussions.
Very, very true. And the discussions are being put there on the table right now. I mean, you've raised a whole bag of issues. It's quite a mixed grill there. Let's come over to the studio here. I mean, within the context of being an effective tool that Hamza just spoke to now, Dr. Uzoma, do you think state policing is the balm of Gilead? And but more importantly, I'd like you to tell me or speak to, our viewer, on what basis and only on what basis can state policing become an effective tool to curb insecurity in Nigeria?
System of government that we practice, yes, the states are at liberty constitutionally to have their own police, just like we have the state assembly that make
you mean
laws.
It doesn't require constitutional amendment? It's already enshrined in the constitution, as it were? Technically,
yeah, because looking at the structure of the system of governance that we practice, the three-level system, three-tier system. So if a state has a state assembly, so the state assembly should be able to make the laws, okay, to see, because the needs are there for the state police, because you have a duty to protect your state. And the governors every governor being the chief security officer of his state is telling you and I that, relying on the federal police has not been helpful, because the dynamics of things in terms of security dynamics, the challenges are changing. So you also need to change your approach. For over, this 2 decades plus of this democratic dispensation, the federal police system has not really worked for us in enhancing security of lives and properties, which is the cardinal mandate of government. So these governors, individuals, policymakers have looked at it and say, looking at what is obtainable elsewhere, that the state police will be much more apt in helping to solve the security challenges that we are confronted with. But again, you see, just in the previous administration, the matter also came up very well. Even office of the vice president, the former vice president, they presided over it. They looked at it with relations to community policing and everything. But you also have another school of thought that says that no, state police is not actually the problem. Looking at the political dynamics and nature of our country, Nigeria, in terms of you have issues of ethnicity, tribalism, our diversity, wherefore you have over 300 languages. For instance, in the, looking at maybe the way we are divided politically in terms of geopolitical zone, you have 6 geopolitical zones. For me, or maybe certain school of thought will say, oh, we should have more of regional police, since maybe based on geopolitical zone, we already divided, because certain states might not be buoyant enough to be able to finance state police, because we've seen that they, in terms of paying their workers, civil servants, what you have the minimum wage, it's been a problem. You see states across the geopolitical zone owing workers 1 year up to 6 months, up to 1 year and 6 months salaries. So when you now have a state police, you want to owe less security personnel, then that means you want them to maybe from the back door sell their arms to criminal elements. So the chances that criminality will increase is there. But there is also the argument will also be that yes, we now know that we have a mandate to secure our state. We the state governors will maybe make it a duty, a point of duty, to look at the other alternative way of funding this police system, in the sense that if you get the security right, every other thing will be right. Then they will also have some share of their funds being controlled at the center that they need to withdraw to fund the state police system. But again, that brings you also into issues of the same cry of marginalization that they've been crying at the federal level will still be obtainable in some states. Like from where my brother is speaking from, that's a Kogi state. So you have maybe the tribes that are more dominant in the state and the ones that are minor. So when you have a state system, you see the majority will always be there in terms of high rank, and they will also cry for marginalization and things like that. And to crown it all, maybe from another lens also, you see that these same governors that had at one point in time or the other rejected state police system are now looking at it politically. To what advantage would this state police be to me? Oh, I'm now at liberty to control, to determine, to control the state police chiefs. So you can use them during election or some things you consider personal as against the collective good of the state. We might have a situation where for within a year or less, the police chiefs will be removed over and over. If you don't play the card of the governor, it becomes a problem. So these avenues we must scrutinize before we concede to state police.
We'll dial down on issues that you've raised, Doc, on operationalization, on finance and mandates, a couple of other issues that you've raised. But earlier on, while you were speaking, I saw Amzad nodding in agreement. Perhaps, Amzad, you want to come in here and tell us why you were nodding in agreement and agreeing with most of the points that Dr. Uzoma here was outlining?
Yes, I totally agree with Doctor's points. Of course, these are the same issues that we have raised in terms of challenges. But why I was nodding my head was more of that. Should we not be looking at the positive sides of it? What are the positive gains we're going to get by getting state police? We know all the negative ones. We know in terms of domination by one tribe, politicians will use the state police against their opponents. We know all those ones. But the question is, what is the positive gains in it? One of those positive gains is that let's tell ourselves the truth. Our security architecture, the way it is, internal security architecture, cannot provide security for us. If you look at our landmass and look at our population and look at the number of security agencies we have for internal security, we know that we are even lucky to still have opportunities to do what we're doing right now, like talking to you on the news channel right now on NTA, because we have large gaps in our population, large gaps in our landmass, where internal security is non-existent. For instance, if we take Niger State, for instance, is the largest state in the nation, 86,000 square kilometers. And for heaven's sake, you have less than 6,000 policemen. Who will guard who and who will protect who? The average response time everywhere in the world is 5 minutes for any kind of alert to the police, alert to security agencies. 5 minutes is the most you can take before you can respond to an emergency situation. In Nigeria, even in Abuja where we reside, the response times is always more than 10-20 minutes. And so by the time you start looking at it in our communities where we don't have police officers in more than 2 or 3 wards joined together, you'll be asking yourself, who is policing us? Who is providing us the security that we're enjoying? It seems
True.
somehow that something is wrong. So there are always other positive gains we can gain from state police. Yes, we know we have negative gains. Let's begin to look at the positive first, and then we can tackle the negatives
Yes,
that we
and
want.
I agree with you, Hamza. I agree with you completely. We look at the positives, and perhaps, of course, we're not naive about the negatives as well, because they would always be there. And that's why I would want to come to you now, or stay with you rather, with the same issue, or an issue that I think that Dr. Uzoma raised earlier when he talked about mandates of the police. And I think it's Jermaine will talk a bit about that, since, I mean, you are quite focused on the positive. Because, I mean, the whole thing is this, and it's a seeming presumption that I'm not saying you are creating that presumption or assumption, but I'm saying it's out there, that the state police or establishment of state police will suddenly flip the script and improve policing generally in Nigeria, inclusive of public perception, and also inclusive of the attitude of policemen or police officers themselves to carrying out these mandates, the mandate of protection of lives and property. I mean, because we're not going to get spacemen come out of space to become police officers. It will still be the same Nigerians who are going to be the police officers. How suddenly will that change? I mean, public perception, for instance, of what Nigerians, most Nigerians, or some Nigerians, a good number of Nigerians out of the Nigerian police, and then you now create state police. How does that change suddenly? And then how does their attitude to policing, these same Nigerians that will be policemen, how does it also suddenly change to becoming the force or police department or police commission or police command that becomes totally focused on curbing crime, carrying out its mandate of protection of lives and property? Amza.
Thank you, Nemdi. I like the fact that you want us to put this narrative, this conversation into context and look at our environment. Nobody is saying that immediately you create state police. Like, for instance, immediately you create political parties, all politicians will now learn to behave themselves. Or maybe if we create an electoral offences tribunal, then all offences will no longer be electoral offences will no longer happen. No, it's not that. We're not saying that if we create the state police, everything will automatically go into positive. No, we're still going to be stuck with that mindset that we have as Nigerians and how we behave. That's a different conversation for a different day. How do you build your human capacity to be able to perform the constitutional duties that you want to set up the police to do? But the question is, we have a problem on ground, and that's why I like how the analogy you gave. Can it be the magic wand that we're looking for? It's like somebody who is sick, and you are telling him that if you take this medicine, the medicine will make you feel better. They don't know whether it's going to work or not. All they have is faith. We have faith that we have tried the centralized police system. It's not working. It hasn't worked for us. So maybe if we try the state police, maybe it's going to work. And that is the excitement you're hearing when people offer this as an alternative to the centralized police system we have. So my thing is this. When we talk about how will it operate, who will fund it, those are the nitty-gritties that we have to sit at the table with the governors, the federal government, and the local government, including the communities. Because at the end of the day, crime is committed locally. Every crime is committed in a particular community. And so we need to provide first a primary shield around our citizens in our communities to say that if a crime is committed, within 5 minutes, some security agency will respond to it before the perpetrators leave that community. And within 10 minutes or 20 minutes, another shield, another circle of security from the local government will respond. That way we can graduate until finally we get to a federal police where the person or the perpetrator will no longer be able to escape. That is how it works. It doesn't work with just having one circle around the citizen. It doesn't work that way. So I think going forward, this conversation is something, and I like that we're beginning to have it. We have been calling that let's have this conversation. It's something we need to bring to the table. Can we have an alternative to what we have right now? You can't have 350,000 policemen and you expect miracles. It doesn't work that way. In Kogi State, for instance, we have less than 4,000 policemen for a population of almost 5 million. So who will guard who and who will not guard who? And you have a majority of them who are attached to VIPs. So what is remaining for us to give protection to communities? So that's why we're bringing the alternative and we're saying, can we have this conversation and come to a conclusion on how will it work? Let's leave it for those who are qualified to do that one again.
Dr. Zoma, how expansive should this conversation be? I mean, you've listened to Hamza there talk about, I mean, how far he thinks this conversation should carry in terms of operationalizing state police. In your opinion, how far do you think this conversation should go, even before the state police comes to force? Of course, that's if the president and the state governors decide to go ahead with this move and then consult with the National Assembly, of course. How far should the conversation go in the first place?
You should go as far as looking at the mandate or the essence of police. In the first place, why do they exist? Why do we need police? For prevention of crime, crime busting, and what have you.
But isn't that clear enough? Isn't that obvious enough as to why we need it?
It's not clear in the sense that there are indices, factors that are responsible to for crime. You might have, okay, if we approximate our population at 200 million, and you want to have 20 million police personnel, that doesn't guarantee that you will have security. People will still commit crime even inside the police station, even officers, when the necessary things are not in place. Imagine having a police officer all in the name of he has the uniform as a police officer, but there is no salary to pay him, and maybe the wife or the children need medical attention.
You're obviously,
and he doesn't have and he doesn't have that resources. Sure, and he doesn't have that resources. The kids are not on scholarship. Yeah. He need to trek from his home to his station. He doesn't have accommodation. The welfare are not well taken care of and things, and you expect him to perform magic all in the name of state police. The answer is no. It's as good as when certain individuals will tell you that the total system of Nigeria need restructuring. So when you restructure and we are maybe tweeting into a state police, who are the individuals you are going to recruit to work as
quality of
officers?
personnel.
The quality of the personnel, then we must go down to the cradle level and start training them from the nursery schools, primary, and start changing their orientation about what we want to have. You don't use the corrupt individuals that have been used, for instance, as talks to politicians or those who want to play the game. Certain politicians selecting individuals they want to occupy key positions, all in the name of police. You will still have no security. And you see the way some of, okay, like my brother Hamza made reference of Niger State, how vast the land mass is and everything. There you come certain geopolitical zone, like the 5 states that makes up the Southeast, is as good as one state, almost the size of Benue State. Okay, so if you do that, you see that these areas can be well policed in terms of state police as against Niger State. But internally, you will still have problems. And when you see states that are intermarried themselves, like Lagos and Ogun State, Imo, Abia, and Enugu, you will still have boundary dispute issues. Oh, the state from the police from state A crossing over to state B to do this. So those are areas that we must look at critically.
Yes.
And you cannot just eradicate the federal police. Whether you like it or not, at every point in time, the federal police system was still coming to in, because you see, you have some states, let's say, I think Cross River and another, maybe Benue, they're already having landing disputes. And you see that in certain of those areas where states have often have a land dispute, you post commissioners of police that are not even indigene of any of these 2 states, even as AIG or what have you. But when you have when you pay more attention on the state police, you see that each of the commissioners of police in the state police will align with their people, and they will treat the neighboring indigene from the other state as if he or she is a foreigner. So we must consider these things and look at how we are to address these issues. Okay, for instance, if in my state police, is it that, okay, I am at liberty to apply to work in any of the states, or I must return back to my state of indigenship?
You know, Doc, I'm sorry to butt in there, but I am not surprised that you're raising some of these key issues. These are impediments. I mean, these are issues that we're all too familiar with. You're in the system. So, I mean, it's not surprising, therefore, that you're familiar with most of these challenges that you've inundated, confronting the present-day federal Nigerian police? I don't have to reel them out. I mean, we know them, you know them, Nigerians know them. But then, and what do we need to do first and foremost to ensure that, look, the state police does not fall into the same trapdoor of, you know, things that, like you've talked about. You talked inadequate personnel, inadequate funds, inadequate infrastructure, obsolete equipment, poor training. You made allusions earlier to poor intelligence training. You know, you also talked about how do I say it? Is it political interference now? But then you somewhat inferred, you know, some sort of political interference, and talked about indiscipline as well. So in order to avoid this trapdoor, I mean, this should be part of the conversation, Dr. Uzoma. Naturally, that is what you're saying. You're not, just for clarity's sake, you're not against state policing. No. But you're saying that, look, the conversation must cover these issues and must also cover how to avoid these trapdoors that we'll find ourselves with the federal police. Am I mistaken?
No, you are very correct. So that's how it goes. And when you look at it critically, so all critical stakeholders, the religious sector, all aspects of the society must be involved. But we shouldn't say maybe there might be room for maybe another national conference or summit in terms of security. It should be at the state level, because when you create that room nationally, it creates another venue for certain people, like the way we say that money will be allocated, white papers will be generated, and it will not be implemented. But at the state level, because even when you are, because a sample of the state police system is like, you have some states already running like their Amoteku system.
Yeah.
You have in Lagos State, you see how agencies like LASMA, how they've succeeded. You see the KAI kick against indiscipline, among other those who practice the neighborhood watch. Yes, some have really crossed that threshold, and they have the capacity to function. And if you also see, even under the federal police, you see that some states are really not doing bad. Like Lagos State, where they have a Lagos State Security Trust Fund. Yeah. Over time, the states look at the challenges of the police, not just procuring vehicles like others would do. They go as far as having funds that takes care of maybe the kitting of the personnel, because it's one thing for you to give an individual a uniform that is a police officer. It's also another thing for you to secure him in terms of ensuring that he has all the gadgets he needs, ranging from bulletproof vest to walkie-talkie, his kits, and then how often do you change? Because even the current police system, you just see maybe in a year as they roll, nobody even care if they change uniform or not. Do you understand? So these are, it's really going to be a huge burden for states. But certain states, like we made reference to Lagos, Rivers, and others, may have the capacity to be able to do that. What about those
you'll be
who
surprised,
doesn't have
Doc.
it?
Actually, you'll be surprised, because I don't think it's easy for any states at the moment. So incurring additional wage bill, if you ask them, I mean, yes, governors and states may be all for it right now, but who knows what happens when it gets to how do you now finance this force, this state police force? I mean, that's an issue we've talked about earlier and we'll continue to talk about. But let me just flip and jump over to Amza there, and let's talk a bit more about operationalization. I mean, Doc here has talked about not discontenancing the federal police, because of course we'll need them at every given point, just so we avoid duplicity of function. I mean, and not begin to draw the line perhaps where the federal police would operate and how the state police would operate. I hear people saying federal police would operate or cover issues of federal crime, state police would dwell on state issues and maybe highway issues as well. You're civil society, and I'm sure you're keenly invested as well in the independence of any kind of state police or the format that evolves. I wonder which format you think would be best for recruiting, say, maybe heads of these states police. Would you consider or subscribe to having civilians like Dr. Uzoma here with me, with expertise in security and safety, maybe campaign and get voted in as state police commanders or commissioners, depending on what carries at the end of the day, and if that move succeed? What kind of format would you like to see happen here?
Well, thank you, Namdi. I think I was actually agreeing with Doctor when he was making his submission concerning what the real fears are in terms of how the inner workings of this idea, this concept. Remember, it's just a concept on the table right
It's a
now.
concept at this
How
point,
is
I
it
agree, yeah.
going to? How is it going to play out? And how is it going to solve the problem that is intended to solve, or is it going to create another monster in the room? So, of course, we all have that fears that let's not create another problem for ourselves by creating a state police. But for my own thinking, in terms of how it's going to work, we've seen climes, federations, federal systems where police system actually works. For instance, you have the Indian system, you have the Switzerland system, you have the American system. Of course, the American system is the most popular one. We know where the state police only comes in when a crime has moved. Where the federal police only come in when a crime has moved from state borders, from one state border to another. Once a criminal has moved away from where the source of the crime is and has crossed over the border to another state, the federal police takes precedence, working with the state police to solve that crime. Or, like you said earlier, depends on the crime. If you commit a federal crime, for instance, you commit murder. Murder is a federal crime. Of course, the federal police takes charge in terms of. Doesn't mean that the state police will not be around for investigation and collection of evidence, but it means that the federal police will be the ones who are going to prosecute this crime. And so, yes, like I said, we need to sit down and have this conversation.
True.
Who does what and where? What actions should the state police be left with independently, and what actions should the federal police be left with independently? And by the way, who oversees all these persons? Where do they get their trainings from? I love what Doc was saying. In terms of trainings, where would they get their trainings from? We know in the United States, some of they have their police academies where you have to go for you to qualify to be a detective. So it means that in the police force, we should have detectives, not just investigating officers, but detectives who are well trained in the art of collection and prosecution of crime, collection of evidence and prosecution of crime. And so we need all those nitty gritty. But my take in this is this: if we focus more on what the challenges are and what our problems will be if it goes wrong, then we will run away from actually accepting. And I like what you said in the beginning. Do we accept, or do we take it for granted that we need a police force? It's not for granted that we need a police force. We have to ask that question. Do we need internal security? If we say yes, then we can come to this conversation. What kind of internal security do we need? Do we need a centralized one? We have tried it for 62 years. It seems not to be working. Can we change the format? We are going to have problems. Even within the United States, when in the 19th century, the mafia took over the police system of some of the states. It's not all states that we are moving fine. No. We had the mafia, we had drug peddlers taking over states. And so, but it's a work in progress. We need to accept, like Doc said, some states are good at it. Some are not too good at it. It's going to be a learning curve. Some governors are going to use it against their perceived ways. Yes, they will do it. We're not oblivious of that. They must do it. That is the Nigeria we have found ourselves. But it means that we have opportunity for us to change the narrative, to keep working on the system. But first, we have to accept the system. Once we accept it, it's like our political system. We've agreed that the politicians are not good. Political parties are not good. Our electoral system has issues. But we are dormant and agreement. We have an agreement that we must follow democracy. We've all agreed on it. So the same way we need to agree on the internal the security system, and then from there we can move on.
Very well, Amza. I hear you very well. Doc, I mean, since we're looking at all sides of the issue, and I mean, you over time you've raised and queried the, wage bill in anticipation of when they move or whether it succeeds or not. We all know for a fact that states, will bear the financial burden of ensuring operationalization of new independent departments or maybe commands, as they choose to call it, under their jurisdiction. So, Doc,
yes,
with more than 2/3 of the 36 states, struggling at the moment, even the wage bill for buoyant states like Amza talked about, for states like Lagos, is even on the increase. If you ask Lagos State's governor, he will probably tell you that it's not reducing, it's actually increasing. So cutting costs, some of these states are looking at how best to cut costs. How then will these states ensure that state policing isn't just a fad and a caricature of an idea that fails from the very beginning. You know, Doc, do you think maybe considering a federal bailout or maybe, let me say, take-off fund will come into the whole mix at this point if state police is to carry? Because some states might not even have funds to create their own police in the first place.
Okay, I think let the nomenclature not be restricted to state police. For me, it should be regional.
Regional, that's your take.
Regional and state police system. For states that are independent, that can maybe in full-fledged carry out, fine and good. But for states like, if you ask me, just going by landmarks and maybe the communal nature of certain geopolitical zone, I will even recommend that maybe people of the Southeast, for instance, should run a regional police system. Okay. That will help to maybe limit issues of cross, maybe boundary issues, identity, because you have some communities that or village that you are one leg into another state, you are another leg in the other state. Okay, that will help solve such issues and bring the people more closer than separating them with issues of police. Okay, then, and looking at the...
Dr. Zoma, there was a question I asked Zah earlier on structure. I would like for you to add that in addition to, sorry to cut you off there, in addition to your explanation on structuring. Would you see, or would you also be open to a situation where a state police force or a regional police force like you are advocating as like a civilian expert as its head, or, you know, managing and administering such a police force?
Okay, let me clear. You remember, just like you said, we already have the Nigerian police force. So bringing up maybe state police or regional police, that word force will not be there. It will not be the people's police or citizens' police. Okay, let the federal do.
It can't be like a police department, Abia State Police Department, FCT Police Department, like the American system. They have the NYP. They have police departments basically in states, and then they have county police as well. Can't we have a similar system?
You can have Abia People's Police.
Okay.
Or Abia People's Police. Because let the police be for the people, not for the government. And that is when the people will participate in it. We might maybe...
At that point, can you have somebody, one of the people, someone from the people now, perhaps come out to contest, to campaign and gets voted to become State Police Commissioner? Nnamdi Odipo becomes FCT State Police Commissioner, for instance.
Let me shock you. You see, solutions to our problem as Nigerians are already in place. You see, the National Youth Service Corps, that's another avenue, very good avenue for you to recruit people straight into the police or regional police system. Okay. As people are finishing their secondary school leaving certificate or whatever, you go there, you select them, you are already monitoring them in terms of their character, their result, and it's a very good avenue. Then you start breeding them anew, not collapsing the federal, the ones you can remove for good from the federal system and localize them to the regional or state police. You can use them for 40%. Okay. Experts like you will make reference, those who have developed themselves as an expert or something. They will constitute 10%. That makes it 50. Okay, with the student. Then the new breed, those whom you've been training from primary school level and you captured, whose mind maybe more or less tabula rasa, not really polluted. You get them, they form the 60%. You see that over time, those with experience, the 10% professionals will be out of the system for these guys, this new breed that has that consciousness of citizen police to fill in there. But again, wherefore the state does not have the capacity, the officers, personnel of this would be state police or even the federal police we have, are not even asking for much. But it's just that governments seem to lack the ideas of the proper policies to implement in terms of their welfare. What does it take to feed the police officers? I remember some years back when my uncle was heading one of the police units. Their wives, we know them with farming, they farm vegetables, and you see them making them money. But these days, go to police barracks, they don't even have space to farm. Please, we cannot be talking of food insecurity, for instance, whereby we have the police, we have the civil defense, we have the army. They can also create their own farmland. Imagine if maybe the army have 1,000 hectares of land to farm somewhere in Benue State, and you are saying criminals or herders invaded the military or the police farm that they are securing. No, they can have all those enterprises whereby they generate money, subsidize their food for themselves, which is also another avenue of generating. Then the state government will give a scholarship to their children. And what? Okay, in terms of maybe accommodation, you make sure that the moment you are commissioned from that day, maybe 2-bedroom apartment based on your level is you start contributing to own a permanent home. But wherefore maybe somebody is nearing retirement after contributing 30 to 35 years in service, you see that even your pension gratuity cannot afford you a 2-bedroom flat. You see that 1 year, 2 years to the exit of the system, they want to be corrupt. They need to partner and do one thing or the other in order to make a living. Let it not be that after 35 years of service, they have nothing to show for it.
True. Gentlemen, I mean, I've gleaned a lot from what you've both said. It's clear. I've heard, faces jump out at me here and words, citizen police. I wonder how different that is from community policing. I've heard, when I offered to contest for State Commissioner of Police position, if it does come up, I saw Hamza shake his head in agreement. Nnamdi, come on, go. I mean, I will be making Hamza my campaign manager if and when that happens. Well, so far, gentlemen, I think we have talked enough on the issue of state police. I would, at this point, like to switch gear and look at the clamor in some quarters for a return to the parliamentary system of government. We will, in the remaining minutes of this episode, weigh the pros and cons of changing our governance system from the current presidential system of government back to the parliamentary system. For clarity, let me draw the distinction between both forms of government, of system. In a parliamentary system, executive power is vested in the elected parliament or legislature, while in a presidential system, it is vested in a separate elected president. The head of government in a parliament or parliamentary system is usually the prime minister, whereas in a presidential system, it is the president. So, I mean, and this is for our viewer, the key distinction lies in the separation of powers, basically. So, Hamza, for long, we have tinkered with the idea of restructuring, returning to the time when the regions were stronger and all. It will seem like this renewed clamor for by some parliamentarians is more or less in tune with that clamor for constitutional restructuring, and whether or not we return as a country to parliamentary democracy or parliamentary system of government is just a fallout of years of that struggle for restructuring. Do you concur?
Well, Nnamdi, I think like how we began the discussion on state police, this is more like throwing our hands in desperation, in despair that the presidential system has not worked for us. That is why we are looking at, can we try something different? But unfortunately for us, we have already tried the parliamentary system of government in our early histories, and we saw how it played out. Our challenges with working with the parliamentary system is not in itself, the system itself, is the issue of us, the people. Do we have the culture? Because parliamentary system is for a very cultural, a more cultured system, where the people themselves, governance is domiciled with the people, not with politicians. And so the people decide what happens to politicians more in a parliamentary system. There is no tenure system for parliament. The people can decide to call a quick election if there's no working. And so you don't have a head of state who will tell you he has a tenure system and so he can do what he wants to do for that 4 years and nothing can happen to him. So that doesn't happen in the parliamentary system. So it requires a kind of culture, a kind of mentality, a kind of behavior from the electorate to run that kind of system very well. The question we should be asking, because for me, I see it as a knee-jerk reaction. We shouldn't be talking about going back to parliamentary system. What is wrong with our presidential system of government?
True.
I think the very first thing that is wrong is we are spending too much to run the system. And that is what people have kept saying. The cost of governance for this presidential system is too high. The people cannot afford it anymore. And so why don't we reduce the cost of governance? Why are we deciding that we want to jettison the whole type of government and move to another form of government? There is still going to be corruption in the parliamentary system. You're still going to have politicians who don't have the kind of behavior that they should have. It doesn't change. We're not changing the politicians that we have, the crop of politicians that we have. We're not changing them because we're not changing the Nigerians that we have. The same Nigerians are going to run that system. They're going to see the same problem we probably said, and then it will lead to more instability. So for me, the thought of going to a parliamentary system is going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. This presidential system is already for a kind of people who are docile. Citizens who are docile give their rights, offer their rights to the politicians to run. And so the presidential system seems to work for us. But maybe we need to begin to look at what are those things that are not working in the presidential system. Let's change them.
I think it's a good thing that we are throwing the people into the mix here as we begin this conversation. And I'd like for Dr. Uzoma to take off from that point. I mean, to what extent does either system of government influences the quality of governance? I mean, you've listened to Hamzat there. Do you agree with advocates of this return to parliamentary system of government who say it has that edge over our current system in terms of political development, in terms of economic development, and even in terms of human development? Hamzat said it there. It's the people. I mean, do not forget, it's the same Nigerians who would administer the same system, or, if we were to benefit from anyone. Is it that our democracy is not accruing, we're not accruing benefits right now that we're running the presidential system of government? Is it the system, or is it the people themselves that would determine, what happens in the government? Dr. Uzoma.
You see, Nigeria is not the only country in the world that is practicing democracy, be it presidential, parliamentary, and what have you. The question is, why switch gear? What is the conviction that switching to parliamentary system would work? See, we say environment is a determinant of history. So would the environment, given the fact that we've experimented the parliamentary system, we've experimented, we had military coups and what have you, now we have a consolidated democracy under the presidential system. Why can't we make it work? Why is it not working? Is it not working because of the executive, the president, or the legislature, or the judiciary? It's not working because of the people. It's because of the people. Because the people doesn't want it to work. The so-called politicians stealing the national cake or annexing it to themselves. They are not living in Dubai. They are not living in the United States. They are living in this same Nigeria. We see them every day, even if we don't have access to them because of VIP security. We attend the same church. We attend the same mosque. And when they call for parties, we go for the parties and we eat from the stolen funds. That is why the people are the problem. So, and when matters come, because for instance, there is a trending video now of maybe an offshoot of the just concluded party primary of the ruling party in Edo State, whereby maybe somebody was counting, after 309 he jumped over to 500, and that issue, whether doctored video or anything, because these are realities, things we see on ground, how things are changed. They are not changed by angels or people from Benin Republic or elsewhere.
Absolutely not.
They are Nigerians. It will still take us to make things work. If the presidential system is expensive, how can we cut the running cost of government? Yes,
because that's one of the issues that
few weeks ago, we heard the president say, if I'm traveling as a president, I limit my aids to this number and this. And the question I asked, let me see the impact on our economy. There is nothing that have shown in our economy today that was really put to effect. That is working, that it was implemented. The answer is no. And this is not the first time.
Actually, it's been implemented, Doc.
Is one thing. I can only agree that something is implemented when I'm feeling it. When we are feeling it, the impact in the society.
I get you.
That's what they told us is on paper, but we've not seen it on reality. That this is what is in place. So these are part of the problem. And you see whereby everything is concentrated maybe at the center, because when you look at the indices and the things that are in place in the presidential system, what are the things that we can change? Yeah. For instance, when you see maybe all the government institutions, major agencies are concentrated here in Abuja, for me, in my own opinion, is very wrong. That's why you see that certain infrastructures across the region or the state are not viable. Whereby you put everything in Abuja, so people need to fly from Imo, Lagos to Abuja to come and meet the Minister of Petroleum in Abuja. Whereby there is no petroleum in Abuja.
It doesn't appear like you're arguing the point. You're arguing the point for proponents now. Because if you're saying that, look, you do not agree for things to be centered in Abuja, proponents will, advocates of this call now would rally and say, you see, Dr. Uzoma just said our point, just made our point, because we are saying let's share weight in the center. That's one of the things they are saying. Let us reduce the weight in the center and push these weights, or even these weights, to the regions, to the states. You know, that's what they are saying. So it will seem like you're arguing that point. But
no, not in that direction.
Gentlemen, my director just told me that we've overshot our time, which is quite unfortunate. I think we overdid or overstayed on state's police, and you know, that to the detriment of this issue, which is also quite germane. But it will seem from the bits that you've said, both of you have said, that it's clear that neither systems of government is how would I say? Let me not say neither that it depends on the people. It depends on our attitude, because after all, leaders emerge from the people, and if people truly deserve the kind of leaders that they get, and that's the point there. I'd like to take your closing statements from, or rather, the closing statements from both of you on this matter. Let's begin with Amza there in Lokoja. Amza?
My just final thoughts that we need to stop this knee-jerk reaction that we do to issues. We need to be more strategic and more scientific in our approach to looking at problems, looking at solutions. The people are desperate; they're looking for help. So we, the elites, or of course those of us who understand and are discussing these issues, need to come up with solutions that are workable for our people. We should not follow this bandwagon effect of saying this system is not working and it's these people that are responsible for it, so let's just say no. We need to begin to look at issues around how do we do it and what are the resources available to us. Our education system is not helping us. It's not allowing our people to be able to critically look at situations. We don't train our kids to have critical mentality, critical thinking, ask questions. We need to begin to look at it, because like we have all agreed, it's the people that determines the form of government that they get. Sure. And it's only based on what they know, their knowledge, that will determine how far they can go.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Uzoma.
Well, my final statement is the solution lies in our hands as the people, the citizens of the nation. We need to hold our elected representative, assembly members, rep, governors accountable. Not just the president, because these people, like I said, they are not foreigners. They are our fathers, they are our uncles, they are our brothers. We need to hold them accountable to make sure that maybe not just their campaign promises, but rather the real essence of governance, what maybe those are the helms of affairs in public offices, owes the society, the local government, and the people at large are being delivered. That's we having the dividends of democracy.
Dr. Uzoma, Dr. Kingsley Uzoma, I beg your pardon, a public affairs analyst and security and safety consultant. I'd like to thank you so much for your participation in our program, this episode. I hope we'll see more of you. I've actually been after you for a bit now. You're a very busy person, I know. Last time was you were actually there in Lokoja, where Amza is right now, and we were unable to have our interview, but I'm glad to have you here in the studio after all. Thank you so much indeed for coming.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Hamza Aliu, human rights activist and executive director, Initiative for Grassroots Advancement, INGRA. I'd like to appreciate you as well for taking time out to join us in this discussion. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me again.
That's it for this episode. I'm sorry I couldn't bring you the other accompanying segment. Insight will be fully back same time next week, God willing, when we shall attempt to get some more insight into all